he was one of the greatest critics of Abiola before the June 12 elections. At every public forum, he was calling him the de facto vice president. Remember then?
Yes.
Gani was making those famous speeches. Yes. Like Abiola was the de facto vice president of the country and all of that. You know, he was saying it publicly because he didn't care who's Oxford. He was the likes of the fella, you know, but he's in his own field.
The fella of the legal profession.
Of the legal profession. He just said it the way it came out from his mind. And nobody could stop him. But the moment the June 12 elections were annulled, and Abiola stood up and said, I will contest this, that it is unacceptable, and I will contest it. Gani was the first to write, remember, was the first to write to Abiola that I will join you in this battle to chase away the military. He didn't care whether it was his enemy or not. Because the principle came first before the relationship. That was it. And so, you know, so that's it. I mean, for us, for example, for us too, we also had a disagreement with the national conscience because we started it together, and you know, I left the chambers. There were disagreements with national conscience, and nobody didn't care. He took me like his son. The moment he knew I was also on the right path, he was the first to call me too. So after I left him, he was the first to send a message to me.
What kind of disagreements did he have with the Bar Association?
Because he believed in his own principles. He didn't want to go with the collective. It happened also under Nuhu Ribadu. When the NBA said they should sanction Nuhu and all of that, he resigned as one of the executive members, as one of the, I think, board members or so of the NBA. Okay? The NBA said nobody should appear before military tribunals at that time in 1984.
Yes.
Remember?
Yes.
Buhari's military tribunals. But you see, the same thing, that's why I say consistency is the hallmark of Gani Fawehinmi. Once you are fighting corruption, he doesn't care how you fight it. Whether you breach the rule of law, whether you throw away the constitution, he was a slave to his conscience, like I said. He believed Buhari was doing the right thing. He was throwing all politicians in jail. They were trying them by military tribunals. The NBA said, look, we're not going to take this. You are breaching their fundamental rights and all that. Gani said, and they gave an instruction to all the lawyers. Don't appear before military tribunals. Gani picked up the constitution and cited the constitution, that the constitution talks about courts and tribunals.
It was there.
Yes, it's there. It was there. The provision is there. I mean, it's still there till today. The provision says anybody who is accused of offense shall be tried before any court or tribunal. Gani said tribunals are there, and so the NBA could not overtake the provisions of the constitution. They told him not to appear. He appeared and damned the NBA, and they blacklisted him.
Okay.
And they blacklisted him.
So that affected
absolutely
his being able to get.
Absolutely.
But he later got it in 2001.
Absolutely.
Do you think he was absolutely delighted to have gotten it in the end?
He said he was happy but not excited also. I think he made a statement there. He said he was not excited, but he was happy to.
Okay, now, well, at the start you told us about two cardinal principles of Gani Fawehinmi, his activism as well as his advocacy. Now, there is a third that Nigerians have come to know him for, which is philanthropism.
Absolutely.
What would you say about the man Gani on that?
The best about that was his scholarship awards. And he started the scholarship awards in 1973 or 74 or so, where every year he chose to give a number of students a particular amount to further their education. He did that at on the general level. At the time he called for interview. At the point when I was there, I was part of the board of those who selected, the indigent students. And beyond that, he also had the private people he trained. Beyond the fact that he was also giving it to the public. Yeah. There were a few people he picked. I remember there was one Igbo girl that just came to the chambers crying, no father, no mother, and he just said, look, take her up, and trained her to the university.
As simple as that.
Oh yes, it was just as simple as that. It was just as simple as that. I remember also one of his librarians, he trained him, sent him back to school again to read law, and came back and rose to become the deputy head of chambers, all on his bill. But the kind of philanthropism was not to give you Gary and rice. Take notes. He believed too much in education. He believed in the power of education, and they also got that from Chief Obafemi Awolowo.
Okay, Mr. Keyamo, I know you're not a medical doctor, but what would you say of this particular one we have on the front page of today's Nigerian Compass? It's a quote here. It says, Gani Fawehinmi is gone. His life was snuffed out by successive wicked regimes that put him under murderous prison conditions. And here was a man who never smoked cigarettes or tobacco all his life, being diagnosed of having lung cancer, and with a statement coming like this that successive wicked regimes put him under some murderous prison conditions. So would you say that this statement has some iota of truth?
You can't rule it out. We don't want to play to the gallery on this, but it is possible, it's not possible.
Someone said damp conditions in prison.
Oh, no, they are very terrible. I've also been a victim because I also collapsed the last time they detained me too at Area 10, when 60 of us were in one narrow cell. The other time I sneaked in a camera and took pictures. Remember when I brought out the pictures, I also collapsed after 3 days because the condition was so damp. I mean, we were all urinating, brushing our teeth all in one hole. 60 of us in one small corridor, sleeping like sardines. I mean, when I got in there, the first 2-3 days, I collapsed. They rushed me to the National Hospital, and they called Asorok then and said whether they needed to admit me. They said they should take me back, to give me drugs, give me drugs and take him back. So that the conditions are poor. I have also experienced them too. So it is possible. I remember after then, 6 months or a year after I came out, I had this consistent pain in my neck, and once in a while it still comes up now. But I remember it was after then that I had this consistent pain. Well, so it's very possible because you see, cancer is not something that develops overnight.
Yes.
I'm saying this because you need to have a personal experience to know that these things do happen. So it is extremely possible. We cannot rule it out. And well, it is only left to God to decide.
Let's talk about his cases now. A lot of celebrated cases being talked about. Which, in your opinion, really stands out among all the cases handled by the late Chief Fawehinmi?
They are competing for first position. And funny enough, Angela, he was, when you talk about Ghani's cases, you have to be careful. Is it the ones he appeared as lawyer, he was litigant? Because half of the time he was litigant. If you talk about Chief Williams, for example, and the cases he did, you will now see Chief Williams' name in one of them.
Yes.
You will say he did cases for some big companies and set some principles. But Gani half of the time was his own lawyer. He was his own lawyer, his litigant. And so he had cases that he did for others. He had cases he did himself also. Yes. So they were very competing. They were competing. The Delegua cases are awesome. And the principles he said, the right of private prosecution, for example, that he said, that case was a landmark decision. Of course, the only recent one we're talking about that people came to know about that affected our present democracy is the one of Musa and others against INEC. Yes. Where he decided, when he challenged the power of INEC to register and refuse to register parties that have met the constitutional requirements. Yes. Okay, that of course is also a landmark decision. The case of Togo and Gani and Akilu and others, where the Court of Appeal said, look, in cases of libel, you can't just say, you have to mention the particular person, the writer who gave the publication to the editor. You can't just say he circulated it among media houses. That was how he published it. No, you have to mention the names of the particular writers in the newspaper houses that he gave the publication to for subsequent publication. Those are very fine principles of law.
So a lot of his cases brought out new precedents, so to speak. Yes. What about, you've talked about the two types of cases, the ones where he prosecuted and then the ones where he was a litigant. What about his pro bono work? We've been informed that he did a lot of cases for people free. What qualified you, for instance, to have your case done free by Chief Fawehinmi?
Two major ones. I mean, I can say this because we know him inside out. One, if the case concerns a student, not just a student that commits murder, or a student that the case threatens his education.